But no, I'm really happy to be here and talk about some of the things that we've been doing to, to maintain the system and expand access to justice in this most challenging time. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys how challenging this is. We've, some industries are affected less, and I can't think of an industry that's been affected more by COVID. But we've managed to get through what we have because of the collaboration, and I really appreciate FOLA's work. You've been so available, and I'm very appreciative of our ability to work together and make decisions in very real time, very quick, very short time. And we've got some really good Made in Ontario innovation and collaboration that's happened out of this. And of course, FOLA and its members have been a huge part of the urgent collaboration that we had, and was part of the drive to make justice work even better for Ontarians. And not just through COVID. Some of the changes that we've landed on are going to be, they're going to be permanent. Some of them are permanent now. And I think people don't want to go back to exactly the way that it was. We were under no illusions that the system was working perfectly before COVID. So we certainly don't need to go back to some of those clunky parts. And the status quo has changed. The momentum is there. We've created what I like to say muscle memory around how we make change, how we collaborate, how we engage. And I have to say, it's, we were so far behind. We were so far behind what people's expectations were in as a sector in the justice system. And, in 2019, there were things that should have been happening that just hadn't happened for decades. And we don't need to go into why, they just didn't. And the urgent work to bring the system more in line with people's expectation certainly started before the pandemic. There was already a drive to start using the available technology to overhaul parts of the system that really desperately needed it to break down barriers, and particularly for rural and northern Indigenous communities. I mean, things like online notarization and commissioning, that was introduced in Bill 161 back in December of 2019. So we had already started to move in that direction. And I want to highlight that point very quickly. This was all available technology for things like online commissioning and that sort of thing. It's not as though we were waiting for technology breakthroughs to happen before we could start bringing it to Ontario's justice system. And people adapt to technology quite quickly. If you think about the iPhone, really was only 2007. Doesn't feel that long ago, but how fundamentally we've changed how we communicate with each other, text with each other, the photos that we take. We grasp onto the good parts of technology. We didn't have to reinvent the internet. We just had to acknowledge that it was there. And we just had to make the decision to use it to make a better system. And that's what didn't happen before. We just had to turn our minds to it. And I'd come into this role with, as some of you know, different perspectives on our justice system. I'd been a court clerk, so I was the person who actually received the paper over the counter when lawyers came in to file them. I then was a court registrar, so my job was spending time with the new judges, helping them learn about the paperwork, because they were like you, practicing lawyers, and so didn't necessarily know the other side administratively, and so that was part of my job. And then I went to law school and got to learn the system from the practitioner side. So I came at it with a few different views, but I also had a pretty keen sense on the scale of change that was needed. Like, we needed some big fundamental change. And I had some specific ideas. I have my little folder of things that I wanted to get done when I got in there. And with help from people like Ray Leclerc, who I can see on the screen here, we've made some of that change. The Planning Act, for instance. I had things that were really important to me that I wanted to change based on what I'd witnessed in all those different roles. But I heard from colleagues like you, and I heard from the profession, I heard from former clients, I heard from constituents, and as my time municipal councillor, and I had a perspective on how some interactions work there in municipal law. But in all of these, I heard from people they wanted change, and they didn't even feel that strongly about what it had to be. They just knew that it had to happen. And so part of the success that we've had in Ontario in the last, I'll say, year and a half is that we went to the people who knew what they were doing. I don't pretend to know everything. I certainly, any of you that know me know that for sure. But I had a sense of who to ask. And I wasn't afraid to ask, to go out and ask people to help us, to lend their time. And I'm so grateful for the profession that they really did. They went out of their way to above and beyond to help us understand different areas of law and how we can do that. What the pandemic did, it was not only compounding the longstanding challenges that have been holding the system back for decades, but it brought them into focus. And it really did compound them, including some of the people we needed to work with in the system to make it change. Some of the stakeholders within the system really sharpened their focus on the parts that they need to play. And I have to say, there's stories in every sector about the disruptive force of COVID-19. But the justice sector is a transformative story. There are things that have transformed, and it's only through remarkable collaboration that it happened. And the justice partners working together to keep people safe and maintain the integrity of the system, the administration of justice in unprecedented times. And I have to say, working with the judiciary, with the chief justices at all three levels, Chief Justice Strathy and Chief Justice Morowitz and Chief Justice Mazeneuve, were key parts of that they shouldered a lot of the work, a lot of the burden of making change in tandem with the changes that we were making. And it's only because of the collaboration from the practicing bar and all the way through. Now, more importantly, from my perspective, was how the collaboration was translating into how we were fixing problems. And in many cases, some of these longstanding problems, we went as a culture from asking, like, why now? Why so fast? Why not wait and see? To instead asking, why couldn't we make this work? Why wouldn't we take a leadership role and really move the system forward for people? Why shouldn't Ontarians be able to expect reliability, accessibility, and an experience that aligns with the rest of their modern world? This type of dialogue is very much reflective of the work my ministry undertook through this and drove the significant modernization effort. We turned around saying, oh, you can't do that, or you can't do that yet, or it's not fully done, to let's get it out there. Let's get it landed and let's try it. And if we need to change it, let's be open to change. And as you know, many of these efforts culminated in the launch of a Justice Accelerated Strategy, which aims to break down barriers in the system and move services online, closer to communities. And the pillars of the strategy, there are 4 of them. There, new technology and processes to meet the expectations now and beyond, delivering a courthouses of the future, we'll talk about that a bit, and breaking down barriers in Northern and Indigenous communities, critical work that needs to be done. Again, not enough has been done in the past. And fourthly, driving innovation to address longstanding challenges. When we were responding in real time to unprecedented challenges, these pillars were already emerging as priorities because they were elements we were hearing from our partners, from lawyers and from members of FOLA. And it's true that no one sector or community could or would claim to have a monopoly on the challenges that emerged from COVID. But the justice sector has been affected in unique ways. And we play a unique role in terms of protecting the public and providing a service. It's a very complex system, and there are very unspoken interconnectivities in the justice world. There are things that people know, but nobody talks about. And there are things that practitioners know, and the judiciary know, and the court staff, and the support services, and the individual users. And they all come together in each corner of the system thousands of times every day across the province. Keeping the system moving involved getting it right on the front lines. And we were doing it in full sight of Ontarians as we were changing, as we were serving. And people depended on accessing justice. Behind the scenes, thousands of people kept the wheels turning. And we hear the term essential service a lot these days, but I would suggest that justice is more than that. It's a value, it's a right, and it's a foundation upon which our province is built. It's more than an essential service. The pandemic taught us many, many lessons, but perhaps the starkest of all is that the justice system cannot close. We can't just say we're going to go away for 2 weeks and leave people in jails and not have people have their rights. So we have to find ways to make it work. And if we're going to spend the time finding ways to make it work, let's make it work better. Let's make it work on a permanent basis in a better way. So from the very beginning of the public health crisis, the ministry and the courts found ways. They found ways to keep going and understanding the risks of having large numbers of people in courtrooms and judicial settings. We, of course, moved to remote hearings, as you know, as we're experiencing right now in live time. And we helped the courts with their suspension of in-person proceedings. We, the OCJ, the Ontario Court, hears more than 90% of the criminal matters in the province, and immediately prioritized urgent matters, including child protection, serious criminal cases, and that type of thing that required in-person hearings. And we moved the rest to remote. Now, it wasn't an overnight transition, but in government terms, I have to tell you, it virtually was. It moved very fast. And I think we even surprised ourselves a little bit by working together, how quickly we could turn things on its head. And it wasn't long before capacity was expanded to remotely conduct 100% of proceedings involving an accused person in custody. And then we did bail and remand, again, working with Chief Justice Mazanov, bail and remand for out of custody online. And the headlines talked about Zoom to hold hearings in totally new ways and the ability to participate in the system. And behind the scenes, we were all hands on deck, making urgent and targeted investments to update technology, spending real money, new money, not just moving parts around, but securing money from Treasury Board, from the Finance Department to invest and make real things happen. So we had to make sure that staff who had made the sudden shift to working from home had the right equipment as well. And switching their living rooms into a virtual court environment was something that I'm very proud that they stepped up. The administration really did its part. And it meant hardware, it meant software, it meant training. All of a sudden, people had to learn new things. Judges had to learn new things, lawyers and staff, and the training happened very quickly. And again, in terms of normal government timelines, if they said, we're moving too fast, we'd say, well, why not do it the way we normally do things? And the answer, of course, was obvious. It was not an option. So emergency meetings, late night phone calls. I think I talked to the chief justices on weekends more than I did during the week. We'd text, hey, you're free for a minute, you'd figure something out. It was happening in real time. And what evolved into collaborative working groups where we could pool ideas and solutions with the practicing, with the bar and with all the players. And that's how we started moving things forward. We could really brainstorm and come up with things and deploy them quite quickly. So when I say we moved the justice system forward by decades and months, I really believe that's not an exaggeration. I really believe that is what we did. And when I say we, I mean all of us collectively. We could see the culture changing in front of us. We were building the muscle memory around finding the most direct and surest path to fixing problems. And the resistance to change was finally giving way to the recognition that we could not return to how it used to be. And what was exciting for me personally was to see how naturally Ontarians were embracing the changes. We were doing this for a particular reason, but the side benefit of, for example, the verdict in a particularly high profile case allowed 20,000 people to log on and hear Superior Court judge deliver a sentence last June. It felt like one of those watershed moments where we could say we aren't going back. For 20,000 people to connect to their justice system, to see the sentence unfold was really quite remarkable. And I'm not going to throw a bunch of stats at you, but there are some really, really neat things that have happened for the public. And I can tell you that as AG, I can give you my assurances that we aren't going back. We're making more investments, not just in courts as you know them, but in the tribunal system. So into landlord tenant and social benefits and all those types of things. We're stealing the system from BC as our base, investing $28.5 million to get it up and running. And those tribunals will run in a way they never have before. And it's really exciting. BC has 5 years of data to show that it works, to let people settle and get informed and move their matters through. So, in most cases, it's not a matter of saying all matters should be dealt with online or only in person. We know it's important to take into account not everybody has a computer or internet access. And sometimes if they have a phone, they only have 100 minutes. So we have to build it for them as well. Context matters, nuance matters. And that's where the professional perspective is important, and to understand who we're serving. But if you look at how these breakthroughs in our system can transform the way justice is done for Ontarians, no matter where they live, you can't help but get excited. I mean, I hear stories every day from practicing lawyers that say, I used to do JPTs, I'd have to drive to the courthouse, didn't know when I was going to get heard, all that goes with that at the cost of the client. And now they're scheduled for 9:30, they happen at 9:30, and they don't have to leave their desk. That's pretty remarkable in terms of efficiencies in the system. It allows people to do more of value-added work rather than just traveling around. And taking out, and if it's not just driving, I mean, this is allowing us to avoid, the cost of flying even. I mean, up in the north, I think you don't just drive from place to place, as most of you will know. And in rural and Indigenous communities as well, these are breakthroughs. These are really important pieces, and we're not done. We've still got a lot of work to do, but we went from an entirely paper-based system almost to being able to file about 450 new documents online within months. And we're suddenly in a world where civil proceedings and family matters are being filed online. The stats on that, 95% of civil proceedings were filed online now, and over 70% for family matters. That is totally turning it on its head. Those stats were the paper stats a year ago. So everybody's adapted with it. I'm really thrilled about it. And when we first introduced legislation to allow notarization online and commissioning, the thinking was that people don't need to go to the bank for every financial transaction. I sign my lease on my phone for my condo. I don't need to be in that physical space all the time. And it's more convenient for people, it's cheaper for people in the sense of their time, and it's convenient. So that kind of thinking started to grow. We applied it to virtual witnessing of wills, which was first done as an emergency order, but I made sure one of the important parts for me, one of the witnesses needs to be a member of the Law Society. I wanted that integrity there so that we don't, quite frankly, open the door inadvertently to Walmart law, I'll call it. We want to make sure that the integrity of the profession is part of that system. But it lets people formalize their affairs without what was happening. They were out in their driveways, signing on cars, witnessing through windows, all sorts of things that really isn't the way you want your system to operate. And it's now permanent through the Accelerating Access to Justice Act that we just had into Royal Assent, just passed a couple of weeks ago. And I'm thrilled about that as well. It's just the tip of the iceberg. We've got more coming. We've got some out there a little bit, not fully fleshed out, but operating. We have case lines. We have the e-filing at Small Claims Court. We've got online court case search service to get rid of those courthouse terminals. You're going to talk about those someday, like you used to talk about phone booths now, but it should be online. There's no reason it shouldn't. We have online jury pre-screening and check-in tools. We've got an e-intake platform available in the Northeast and Northwest to enable the police to spend more time preventing and investigating criminal activity by cutting down the hours they spend filling out paperwork and traveling back and forth to the courthouse. The e-intake platform is going to expand into other regions, and it's a game changer for resources being spent. I mentioned the 28 million in the tribunal's case management platform. You'll see that. We've announced it. I want to have it landed this year. I want to have it operational this year, and I believe we will. And rethinking the courthouse infrastructure with people at the center. And there's lots that we can talk about on that. Earlier this week, I was participating in a roundtable on the future of the criminal justice system. And one of the topics for the breakout session was called the role of technology in virtual justice and how we achieve equitable access to justice in a country with Canada's geography. And like many of you, I was immediately drawn to the topic because of how important it is for the province as large as Ontario. And I was also interested because my riding has some very rural components as well. And so I have some very urban and some very rural within my riding with a courthouse at the center. But I found the term virtual justice to not quite live up to the scale of what we're able to bring through technology and changing procedures and processes. And while we're certainly using virtual or online platforms to connect people, what we're achieving is very real results in terms of delivering access to justice. It's not virtual justice, it's justice virtually. We need to keep the justice part at the center of all of these things that we're doing. And we have the opportunity to ensure justice is done in a very real way, in a way that we hope will be more effective than conventional approaches. So just in closing, I just want to say on behalf of the ministry, on behalf of me personally, I want to thank FOLA. I want to thank the members who are out there every day, slogging through, protecting people, helping people. And I look forward to continuing to work with you and all of your members to build this accessible, connected, and resilient system that is going to work better for people. So with that, thank you, merci, and miigwech.
Thank you, Attorney General. We have a couple of minutes. I'm just wondering, would you be prepared to take a couple of questions?
Absolutely, sure.
So one of the questions that's been posted on our chat is related to the courthouse in Halton. And I guess the essence of the question is there a timeline in place or a plan in place in order to address those needs that are not being met by virtue of the cancellation of that new courthouse?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's an important piece. There's a lot of work being done to get us where we need to be. I don't have a specific time for you. I'm working with Treasury Board to nail that down. But the plan is going forward for a very substantial redo of that building and some upgrades as well in the Burlington end. So I'm sorry, I don't have a specific date for you, but it is still moving, and it's moving fairly quickly, again, in government terms. Yeah.
Okay. One of the other questions that was posted related to perhaps a more regional approach to court openings. So the question comes from the north, of course, where they're blessed with very few cases, and whether there would be a consideration of relaxing the restrictions on courthouses in those regions that are less affected by the pandemic.
Yeah, so that answer really comes from a couple of different tables. So we take our cues from the doctors, of course, the Chief Medical Officer of Health. We also have some experts who are working with us on the courthouses specifically. That's how we got to where we are with those. I'm not opposed to the concept of regional. We were under regional schemes for other things and that seemed to work in its time. So I'm open to it, but the Chief Justice has to weigh in and have an opinion. They're very much in charge of scheduling and that type of thing. So I'll take that back and have a conversation about with the Chief Justice and some of the tables about where they are with it. I think we have to follow the data, and if say the North is in the clear, as it were, and vaccination rates. Let me share this actually. I don't want to make everything about vaccines. It's not why we're here, but we have 6.5 million people vaccinated with the first shot over 18. We have another 4.8 appointments made. So we're moving very quickly. We're going to hit our 65% target by the end of May, if not higher. So that will help a lot.
Okay, thank you. Terry, you had a question.
Thank you very much. Welcome again back to FOLA Plenary. First off, I wanted to say thank you very much for all of the efforts at modernization, and it's your everyone in the government's great attitude that is really the secret to success. You may recall a couple of years ago at one of these plenaries, I stood at the microphone and spoke with you, and later we spoke in the hall about Crown attorneys and disclosure. And with the pandemic, you've embraced that and you've made it happen. It's working very, very well. I do have a question. I've been advised in my capacity as Southwest Chair for FOLA that in some jurisdictions at a municipal level, the courtrooms have set up, like you spoke of earlier, this telephone booth concept, kiosks where the public can come and access court for a ticket or something of the like through that kiosk with access to Zoom. And I'm wondering if you're looking at all at a consideration for the Ontario Court of Justice level for individuals who do not have computer abilities, perhaps for more significant proceedings like a trial or guilty plea and sentencing. I'm not speaking of simple remands where people can phone in. Are you considering at all doing like some of the municipalities and setting up these kiosks that'll allow the public enhanced access?
Yeah, I mean, Terry, that goes to meeting people where they are and the resources that they need. I think of it as speaker's corner. That's in my head. Goes back a little bit to Much Music, but that kind of thing to make it easy for people. Have the technology in there. Nobody stole the television screen from speaker's corner. Like it was. There's ways to do this. I that is part of where I think we need to have a real discussion about where do the services need to be. Maybe they're part of libraries. Maybe they're part of Service Ontario's. Maybe, I don't know, but I like the idea.
Thank you for that. And then just at a level of the jail system, I don't know if you ever saw, I did send you a rather lengthy email at your invitation. Any thoughts at all? I gave you the heads up at least, on telephones and being able to just not have these collect calls so that inmates are able to access their families and legal representation, other services, perhaps with some sort of monitoring for jail purposes. But without this collect call aspect to it, that's only benefiting the phone companies, in my opinion.
Yeah, the collect call thing was something that I wasn't really aware of. Actually, we didn't know. To answer your question, I don't have an answer for you. It really falls over into SolGen, into that space. So I'll talk to Sylvia about that. But it was remarkable when we first got into COVID, into the pandemic. Nobody had the phone numbers for the phone lines running into the correctional facilities because they were only outgoing. Nobody ever phoned in. So we had real trouble trying to set up technology because they couldn't figure it out. There were thousands and thousands of phone lines running and nobody had the phone numbers. It's all sorts of little practical challenges there. So they would have to figure that out to get the phones changed as well.
Interesting. And thank you for everything that you're willing to consider and for the changes already done.
All right, one quick final question, and I know that there's a number of questions in the chat. So if I might, Attorney General, I will forward you those questions and we can let the group know your answers or responses. But one of the questions from one of my colleagues here in London relates to civil juries. And obviously the pandemic has had an impact on our ability to have jury trials in the civil sphere. We did do a submission, as I'm sure as did others, to your offices last year. Has there been any movement or any indication of any movement on that front?
I would say it's still a topic of discussion. There's not a clear direction in terms of me being able to say we're going to file here or there, or that we're going to do it, or that we're not going to do it. It's still a live discussion. Okay,
well, that's great. I really want to thank you for spending some time with us today, Attorney General, and the Minister has been very gracious with his time and consulting with us and other groups, and that's very much appreciated. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Great, thanks for having me.